Hey y'all, this is Sarah Liljegren with the Home for Humanity podcast, and in this episode, I interview Mark Walsh. Admittedly, I interviewed him several weeks ago. My ability to procrastinate is shining in this example, and I think one reason, maybe the main reason, I have been nervous to put this interview online is how significant Mark Walsh is to me and how significant he is to the world of embodiment. He is Mr. Embodiment. He was my first embodiment teacher coming onto Embodied Yoga Principles fresh out of yoga school. Was incredibly pivotal in my life. It was possibly the singular thing that helped me hold like what was awakening in my body. That is another story for another time. And in this interview, as you will see, we kind of go all over the place, squirrel style, as we say. He's been involved in some trauma education in Ukraine, and that was significant to me. That was kind of the work I was doing as I was leaving Embodiment Unlimited. I worked for Mark Walsh from the time Embodiment Unlimited began up until about the time I moved here to Washington State. And so that was kind of how we've kept in touch since then. But working with him in social media was a wild ride, especially in quarantine. He was a part of the Sane Ukraine, or no, sorry, he was a part of trauma responses for nurses during COVID. And he has also been a part of trauma education in Ukraine. So I was kind of blending all of his different projects that he's done, and he's been so pivotal in the online space and in person on the grounds doing response work for embodiment response, which it's involved in trauma because that's when things get stuck in the body in a way that, like, if you can use them and process them, you're almost doing trauma prevention work, which is some of what his work in Ukraine was doing, was keeping people really grounded together. Those are kind of the themes that we discuss in this interview: how to keep an integrated community safe and trustworthy. These are the themes in how we regulate, the theoregulation, how we regulate in the natural environment, eco-regulation. I mentioned my incredible dependence on other human beings. I am far more reliant on others than I realized before COVID, and I think many, many people are, and we're not talking about it. And Mark has this truth-telling way about him that you'll see, and I admire that deeply. And I try to do that in this work, and I've had a crazy summer, and that's one reason I have procrastinated in getting video content out in the way I've desired. But I was a part of the tribal canoe journey paddle to Muckleshoot, and that took me offline, and I had already was behind a little on the online world at that point. And coming out of something like that, as a new person to the Pacific Northwest, I have some of these themes in this interview too are kind of coming together in my life and questioning living on land, which goes back to real estate and the work that I'm doing here. And I currently am just realizing how much of a fierce advocate I am for fair housing rights and human rights and property rights, and where property rights and land justice, where all of that intersects. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Mark Walsh in this interview, and thank you for continuing to be a part of my journey in finding a home for humanity, mine, yours, it, whatever humanity means and being a human means. So please give me your feedback on this interview and maybe some topics that spike your interest that you would like to discuss with me, or maybe you would like to hear more of in the future. Thank you so much.
Cool. Well, I'm just gonna do popcorn style questions, and we might hop all over the place because we have less than an hour to discuss.
Let's do it. Squirrel style.
Squirrel style. Let's do it. So this podcast is called Home for Humanity, or My Humanity, because something I'm interested in now that I'm in the housing world as a realtor is, and it came before that, before this housing, before being a realtor, I was super fascinated in the feeling of being at home And that's something that you were at the beginning of my learning on how to feel at home in my body specifically. And why is that important? Number one, who are you? And why is feeling at home in your body important to you?
Who are you? Who are you? Who do you come in here and say words in my face? My name is Mark Walsh. I'm most associated with the word embodiment, and I've taught that my whole life, including in companies, to coaches in war zones in over 50 countries, written books on it, done a podcast on it, did a big conference on it that 500,000 people attended. Blah, 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 blah. That's some about me. I live in the west of England. I enjoy the countryside here. I do a lot of movement practices. So there's a little bit about me.
Why is Welcome Home to the Body? Why was that your podcast tagline? And what does feeling at home in the body mean to you?
Yeah, well, I think anyone living in modern life feels disconnected from their body for reasons we can get into. And that is the most fundamental being at home in the body. For me, it's also a way of saying, like, embodiment could seem like, I have to be mindful of my body as an object over there, staring at it like you would stare at a parking ticket. And I think a healthier way to view embodiment is just this poetic metaphor of coming home or being at home. And I think we all have some sense of that feeling. And that's just seemed like a really good metaphor, is even too abstract, a really good way of describing what embodiment was. People just kind of get it when I say, not feeling so at home in your body or coming home to the body. People get it. So I guess that's why it's been a tagline for the podcast for a while.
Is it related to, I love hearing you or Paul and just other people talk about finding a moral ethic to live by through the body. I've heard you say, like, you kind of just have a better life when you can, like, tune in to how you are and live according to some sort of ethics. Do you know if you had any more thoughts on that?
Well, as human beings, we're primarily concerned with the good, the true, and the beautiful. It's an ancient Greek distinction. So, what is true, we need to be able to be calm enough to perceive clearly. What is beautiful, this includes our own sense of aesthetics, but also our own enjoyment, just to be, you can't really enjoy much if you're not enjoying your own body, because that's where the enjoyment comes through, right? Unless you get some very abstract enjoyment from mathematics or something. The body's a gateway to enjoyment. And in terms of goodness, it lets us know what's right and wrong. And this is tremendously uncool to even talk about morality. You can sort of get away with it by talking about values, which is just the same thing, ethics. We envisage the sort of conscience on our shoulder. If you look at like a Disney cartoon, it'll be a little angel and a little devil, as kind of more mental. But most people's experience of it is actually a felt sense of rightness in certain things. And that includes the good. So it might be, for example, holding their baby or fulfilling their life purpose. This is, I do a lot of purpose coaching where it's good for you to do something. It's good for me to do something. And it also includes what we're repulsed by, which, if we're sort of normal, healthy, not too traumatized human beings, violence will feel repulsive in our bodies, to do, to see, etc. So it's pretty important we're tuned into ourselves for finding what matters, particularly in a world full of addictions and distractions.
Would you say that you have to, like, because I want to get into regulation and would you have to come in contact with all those things to understand how you regulate with them? Like, is it important to feel repulsed sometimes and important to?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have a carrot and a stick internally. It's important to know what isn't your jam. It's important to, when you're on a date where you just go, this isn't going anywhere. What are we wasting each other's time for? Right up to the, deep repulsiveness of visiting Auschwitz. I mean, everywhere on that spectrum is useful. People talk about following your bliss a lot, but following your piss is equally important. Like, what pisses you off, what breaks your heart. So for me, both sides are, I wouldn't want to just be in contact with that, right? I also want to be in contact with what nourishes me, what turns me on, what lights me up, what calms me down, all those things.
Why did you say that if we're not too traumatized of people, we can come in contact with that? What happens? You've said like trauma is the opposite of before.
Trauma is the opposite of play, I sometimes say. Numbing and disconnection. So we can think of this in terms of disconnections and connections, or in terms of regulation. Either works. So the big four are the body, each other, the planet, and purpose, meaning, or spirit, we could kind of combine. And we are cut off from each of these, and reconnecting from any one of them makes the others easier. Trauma is that which disconnects us from these. So it disconnects us from relationship, it disconnects us from our feeling of being in contact with the world, being at home in the environment, disconnects us from our spirituality, what we care about, and disconnects us most fundamentally through overwhelm, which defines trauma. It disconnects us to our bodies, to ourselves. So the numbing and the dissociative side of trauma, which of course is a survival mechanism. It's not blaming anyone for that. People space out, tighten up, freak out, get out when they can't handle what's going on, which, by definition, trauma is that which is overwhelming. So unfortunately, that comes with a cost. We're then cut off from ourselves, which means we're cut off from our life, from our ethics, from all these things. There's a lot there, right? Like any listener could just pause and go, whoa, and just an hour in the woods thinking about that. That would be great. Like does my life work in a few sentences casually while I'm sipping on a fucking fruit and protein smoothie?
And then I'll just take the hours in the woods and think about it later, like I have for several years now, which is what I do. Because it's a lot to contemplate, and regulation, specifically social regulation, has been fascinating to me the past couple of years, because it's something I didn't know I needed to the extent that I do. And being out in the woods with people just in and of itself has been shifting to, and like, I don't want to, healing maybe isn't the right word, but it's something that being with people around a fire the first time it happened, like it's just part of my life. And then it didn't happen for a couple of years. And I'm like, wow, this is a felt sense of something. Like I don't feel just as afraid as baseline afraid. We talk about baseline a lot in nature connection. And yeah, can you speak to like these different types of regulation? One I heard you say was like theoregulation.
Well, yeah. So self-regulation's go on. Sorry, after you, sorry.
No. Yeah. Self, social, like with other people.
Yeah, they're the four things again, right?
Like,
so we've got names for them now. So we've got self-regulation, everyone knows about, do your yoga, do your centering, learn that from Paul Linden or me. Do your meditation. I just had an ice bath, great for practicing self-regulation, right? And we can also look at our baseline around that, because there's what the skill you have to move your nervous system up and down, but then there's also the sort of where it's set to based long-term and medium-term based on your lifestyle factors, society you're in, etc. So self-regulation, co-regulation, we need people, even introverts need people. We all need people. And particularly doing things with them, whether that be sitting around a fire, moving together with them. Like, give you an example, I was went for a walk in the woods with my friend Roma yesterday, and Roma's quite severely disabled, so she has a scooter. Okay, it's not Roma, it's another one. And it was interesting because it was co-regulatory just being with her. She's a great listener and a good friend, but we're on this path through the woods, which is just about okay for her scooter. And we weren't walking together, and because of that there wasn't quite the same feeling as co-regulatory when you walk with someone. And she said, oh yeah, my girlfriend also talks about this. So the things we do together, whether it be listening or touching or moving together, singing together, and these are the most human things in the world. This is what, if you visit any tribal people, this is what they do. They hunt together, they sing together, they dance together. This is it. I lived in Ethiopia, people would drum a lot, So there's the co-regulation. And then the eco-regulation is, that's a lot of your life, right? Being in the woods, being in nature. We are tremendously disturbed by the lack of nature around us. Like our whole nervous system is going, you're in hell and you're going to die if you're in concrete building. And, there's things we can do about that. Like I just moved by a river and I do my coaching in the fields. I'm lucky that way. And also I brought a lot of plants into my house. Every room in my house, I think except one bathroom that doesn't have any light, has plants in it. It's things we can do. But eco-regulation, given the times we're in, and then theo-regulation, this is connecting to meaning and purpose. So this itself, like a lot of the people I look at, they don't need more yoga, they need a life that means something, right? Like most people need more community and they need more meaning. Yes, you can use yoga and meditation, all these good tools. You know, I'm probably one of the best in the world for teaching centering tools, right? With Paul Linden and a couple of other people. But honestly, like if you're living in a concrete block on your own and you hate your life and your job, I mean, forget it. So we need all four.
I've heard this. So living outside of Seattle now, we talk about urban density, and they're trying to have more people in cities. And I guess, I mean, you know, over in the UK, you're kind of tapped out on land and like how big the cities can get, maybe. But like here, they're trying to make the cities bigger.
We're
so
crowded
people...
here. UK is super crowded compared to the States. 60 million people on an island that's smaller than Texas.
And so like the design that humans should be living in boxes is kind of this theme that I hear, because I guess various reasons. And so I do wonder about that, like how much nature we actually can just strip out of our lives, or ways to infuse it into the urban design. You know, like there's some cool things.
Well, we're going to invent teleporters and then we can replace all the roads with trees, you know. I mean, yeah, I would. There definitely are urban environments that are calmer. Like I'm teaching in Amsterdam next week, and there's just a lot of water there, you know, a lot of canals. The water's really soothing in Amsterdam. And there's other cities. I was, you know, just in Slovenia, and there's a city by a lake. That was great. Other cities are just very green. You know, London's not bad actually for a big city. It's got a lot of big parks. And there's other cities I've been in, like Moscow. It's hard to find a green park. So yeah, there's definitely urban design as an aspect of it. And then at what point do we go, this is just making everyone insane and addicted? Fuck this. Like at what point? I mean, that was my process. I was living in a city and I just went, enough already. I'm going to go live in a little town. And there's always a compromise, right? Because a village affords nature, but not other possibilities.
Well, that's interesting because like what? And that's what comes to my mind. And that the village aspect is kind of what I'm getting to is like, if we can have that village feel anywhere, even if it is an urban apartment building, are we going to have those needs met to the degree that we could just replace nature? And I think some people do or can.
You can't replace nature. You absolutely cannot replace nature. It's impossible. Like the four kinds of regulation support each other, but don't replace each other.
Well, and then I could talk about food systems and how, well, and then we are nature, being like that community feel, that village. What is the lost village? That there's something that in my notes I wrote that I heard you say, like that question of why do I feel like an imposter? And that maybe is related to because your village hasn't initiated you. And if you have that sense of that co-regulation with the people that you live around, wherever it is, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, we're designed for Paleolithic village living, right? And that's 99.9% of our ancestors were Paleolithic. So like, not just before the computer, way before the plow. Yeah. So, I mean, given that, that's what we've evolved for. And there's modern versions of that. You know, you create a village within a town, right? With the people you know, and making space for that. You know, I just stopped and talked to my neighbors today. I was kind of busy, but I was like, you know what? They're outside in the sun, which doesn't happen that often in England. And I just stopped and talked to my neighbors who were sitting outside. And I'm like, hey, this is important that I talk to my neighbors when I see them and not just be too busy for that. Yeah, pat their dogs and say hi and, you know, ask them about their flowers, you know. So like, that's not nothing. And that's more possible in some places than others, depending on the level of decay, degeneracy. I'm very into this idea of decadence right now. And for me, you know, the sort of urban decadent environment gets in the way of kind of village life. And, you know, there's also, look, I'm not a total Luddite. There's a cyber village as well, right? Like there's the online embodiment village, you know, in an hour's time, I'm talking to Martha Eddy and Dylan Newcomb and all these cool embodiment teachers that I meet on Zoom, who are all over the world. And there's people that are being able to maintain friendships online. You know, I think social media done well has some possibilities. Like, certainly doesn't replace face-to-face contact, touch, dancing together, sitting around the campfire together.
What has been the most interesting thing you've learned about our evolution, our embodied evolution? Because you're on, how many, what episode of the podcast are you on? What that you've been talking
10 or something now. It's a lot of hours of talking to cool people. I mean, I'm very lucky. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And you said it's been a learning journey for you too. Like what's been surprising? And maybe this isn't related to you learning through conversation, but
I mean, listening skills, interviewing is a skill. First couple 100 hours warming up. I'm really tuned into authenticity now. I've had a lot of guests, particularly American guests, who come on and do a sales pitch, and I fucking hate it. Like, it just makes every cell in my body cringe. So authenticity is a big one. I mean, I'm fairly playful in my manner, so that is a place to be playful conversationally. In terms of what I've learned, I mean, there's so many cool topics, and I'll just get guests on who are relevant to topics. You know, I'm exploring decadence now, so I'm talking to a lot of guests who know a bit about that. So it's been a great way to learn. You know, like I was exploring food for a while, so I had a bunch of guests who were like embodied eating specialists, or you know, sexuality. I had a bunch of guests who were knowledgeable about that. So just giving me access to people to learn through conversation is pretty cool. I mean, not everyone's capable of conversing is the other thing you learn.
what does that mean?
Well, some people it's one way, right? It's like a download.
Yeah, you're just listening.
I saw a cool clip of Elon Musk yesterday. Love him or hate him. This journalist asked him this question. It's kind of an arsehole question. And he just takes a moment. It takes like 5 seconds, which is a long time in a TV interview. And you can see him. And then he comes up with a little story from The Princess Bride. You know, offer me money, offer me power. And it's a really cool story to illustrate his point. And it showed to me it looked like he really came up with it in that moment, you know, after regulating himself, because he was obviously just a bit pissed off with the question. That was, you know, it's like, why do you say things that cost you money? You know, and that is like the main ethos of the world, isn't it? It's like, if it costs you money, why on earth would you do it? And it's like, yeah, because sometimes speaking our mind's more important than money. But what was beautiful as I was like, okay, this guy's actually having a conversation here. He's not just come with a pre-prepared thing.
Authenticity is actually, it's interesting you say you're tuned into authenticity, because that the past couple years I've been thinking, what does that even mean to be authentic? Because if we are just a bundle of patterns that we slowly unravel and re-ravel and learn about ourselves, and like we're always shifting identities and moving, you know, physically or otherwise, how do you know people are authentic? If
yeah, I mean, there is that element, it's sort of, you know, kind of Buddhist idea, or from a few other schools of thought, that we're just a bunch of patterns, but some patterns are still much deeper. They're more true. I guess the key thing is what's coming out of someone's mouth a strategic manipulation, or is it actually an honest representation of their internal world? How much are they censoring? How much are they angling? You know, often when I'm in the States, I don't get this with you, but I often get the sense everyone's doing me a sales pitch. And that's a huge barrier to intimacy, because they're objectifying me at that moment. They're trying to do something with me, right? They're not actually trying to connect, and I'm not actually getting a glimpse of what's going on for them subjectively. So the intersubjective is fucked.
Is this why you teach ethical marketing? Because this line right here is so tricky for people, because when they do have something that is worth offering and they're so afraid, because in real estate, I'm in literally mindset coaching regarding real estate, because that's the thing, is like, you have to sell you are your own business. And so they have to teach you how to get your mind in a way that like you believe in yourself as well as the skills. And I guess that's anything. And it is salesy. It's a salesy thing. And I mean, everyone has their own idea.
What does salesy mean, right? So, I mean, I love Tad Hargrave, ethical marketing for
Mhm.
hippies. There's George Cow, there's other people, but they're the two main ones. They're both friends of mine actually as well, but I've followed their
Oh,
work
great.
for years before they became friends. And, I guess Tad would probably agree with this, that normal people aren't good at sales because they're not scumbags. And most people are decent human beings who don't want to bullshit and lie. Bullshit and lying, two different categories, by the way. Two related cousins, bullshit and lies. And because of that, they don't know how to do marketing because most marketing is set up for scumbags. And it's basically, get someone from A to B by any means necessary. And the fact that we think of salesy as an insult, is because it comes from a very unevolved, kind of ethically dubious place most of the time. So what I need to do when I teach my students marketing is I'll say, let's differentiate between Jedi and Sith sales. I use the old sort of good guys and bad guys from Star Wars, right? And people immediately know what Sith marketing is, or Sith sales. And they understand that it's this manipulation, this lying, this making people scared, blah, 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 pressuring people. And then we go, okay, great. So that's not necessary. There's this other way to communicate. Yeah. Like most of my marketing is me playing. It's a lot of jokes. It's a lot of storytelling. Yes, there are sales, sales elements to it, but it's, I think most of the people who follow me trust me because I will say things that aren't particularly popular. Like I just did a post saying, hey, I'm not celebrating Pride this year, and here's 10 reasons why. And I thought it's going to get me crucified. And actually, the main response has just been, thank God someone said it. And I get that a lot. I thought I was going to lose a huge amount of customers. I don't think that I may have done, but I haven't seen any sign of that. More just people going, hey, wow, thanks for speaking the truth. We trust you more now.
Why is storytelling so important? Like you said,
we're narrative creatures. Like we're story. I mean, I'm Irish, right? So that's it's in the blood. Literally, my ancestors were the ones who told the best stories. There's some interesting genetics around Ireland and tribal chiefs who had loads of wives because they were able to lead through stories. So literally, it's in my genes. But I say we're all narrative creatures. We remember stories. It's why the Bible's in parables. It's how we're set up. We're set up to create meaning and to look at life in terms of stories. And, life's just one goddamn thing after another, right? But we make sense of it somehow. And we're set up for that. So I just think it's how we're wired. It's like we're wired to like campfires. We're wired to throw objects at moving animals. We're wired to play, we're wired for certain things.
what was your interview on trigonometry like?
It's good. I was nervous. It was a step up for me because trigonometry is kind of like the British Joe Rogan, right? So it's kind of it's pretty big in terms of British podcasts. It's about as big as you can get. I'd probably have to go into national. Maybe Russell Brand's bigger, but not many. So I was kind of nervous. They had a studio that was really kitted out. But they were good guys. Like they picked me up from the train station, fed me steak, which is always a win. Sorry, vegans. And we hung out. They're the same off camera as they are on camera, which is always a good sign, that people are authentic. They, have a particular style of it. Constantine's a smart guy, and he's quite pokey in his interview style. They're quite like, give me an example. Tell me what, it's that kind of like BBC style of gotcha journalism a little bit. But, from a well-meaning place. And Constantine's definitely sort of blown up since then. He did a talk at the Oxford Students' Union about woke that's done really well online, like 50 million hits or something. He's been on American TV since, so he's sort of made the cross. Usually, a British person's done well when they make the cross channel. They manage to get on whatever evening funny man show is going on in America. So him and Russell Brand are the only ones I've seen lately, I think, from the UK. On the late night funny men. So yeah, it was a good experience as a step up. And they're asking me about Ukraine a lot, and that's fairly intense experience. So it was on the anniversary of the invasion, coincidentally, and they wanted a lot of details and stuff, and I'm like, Some bits a bit rough, so I don't go into all the details. But it's good. On the whole, I'd say very positive experience. Why do you ask? Out of interest, just curious. You spotted that one, or?
Well, yeah, I guess I had seen some of their stuff before. Haven't followed them very long. And I was just surprised to see, like, I hadn't been on social as much around the time that it came out, and suddenly I just got on and was like, oh my gosh, and I thought it was a very good interview, and I thought you did really well.
You know,
And
okay, despite being a bit nervous, yeah.
and some of the, I don't know if there were any West Coast America jabs in that one, but I had this feeling watching it, like, and being here, being from the Midwest, which is very different here than, you know, Seattle area, West Coast vibe. And we have talked about, you know, the culture clashes here and where, how the West Coast does that perspective is different. And now that I'm here and understand it a little better, I was like, I like this bridge that I feel like I hold between, like, your perspective. Like, you had a great California versus, like, British yoga thing one time that I edited doing social media stuff, and I was like, what is it that you feel like the West Coast, like, what's the message that we don't get?
You're fucking insane.
I hardly say we,
You're
you know,
insane.
but
One of the most
speak to that?
extreme cultures that's ever existed in human history. I
Mm.
mean, look, I love California in the sense of I've spent time out there. I love the countryside in Northern California. A lot of my teachers from there, there's some great work that comes from there. If you're into embodiment, there's so much good work that comes from there. And particularly we owe historically, as in all us embodiment people owe, like Esalen and the West Coast scene a debt, because it was where East met West in the 60s and 70s. So it's the birthplace of, you know, the modern version of embodiment. So I say all that, and it's a bit fucking sensitive, isn't it? Let's be honest. In terms of the decadence of modern society, it's most exemplified by the sort of Portland, California, kind of that kind of ring, and probably in Europe, in Berlin. That's the other place it's most exemplified. Which is simple. Like years ago, 20 years ago, I was living on a ranch there, and I used to have to keep the dojo the right temperature, the Aikido school. And what I noticed was Californians, if it was a tiny bit too hot or a tiny bit too cold, they complained vocally. And I just went, my God, these people are comically weak, and they take themselves very seriously. You know, my sense of humor with my kind of Irish playfulness, robustness, just doesn't go down well there. But, you know, it's okay. It's for some people, that approach is going to be great. I would say the kind of neo-Marxist intersectionality that's taken over a lot of the embodiment world there is profoundly unhealthy. They need to read more history, people that have got into that. And unfortunately, it's impacted a whole generation, then it's spread to the rest of the world. Another way of looking at it is just in terms of flavors, right? Like California is a particular flavor. Well, you know, imagine if all embodiment teachers came from northern Sweden. Right? It's like, I like Sweden, right? But, you know, after a while, I'd be like, easy on the meatballs, you know? But like, it's like if everything was Swedish, it would be a bit dull. And if, for example, if you turn on a trauma conference, 80% of the speakers will be from California or in that Californian culture. And they might be different colors, but they'll all be from the same culture.
And I think that's dangerous, especially since trauma is getting such, like, we are talking about it to the degree we are, and how we work with it like largely depends on the experiences. And if there's only one flavor,
Sarah,
I guess you don't have to
when I went to Ukraine, I messaged all the top trauma people in the world, a bunch of whom were in California, because I'm lucky to know them. And a lot of them came back and just said, oh, I don't know what to do with that kind of trauma.
Right.
They used to like middle-aged housewife trauma.
Yeah.
That they like the real trauma they didn't know what to do with. Now there are exceptions. Stephen Porges was very kind. David Baselli was very kind. He used to work in war zones himself, so you know he had some things to say. But a lot of them were just like, I don't know, that's not what I deal with.
And maybe this is a rabbit question, or like squirrel, but when you say be prepared to work on your weakness when you do work with this stuff, what does that mean?
Be prepared to work on your weakness when you work with what stuff?
Well, maybe strength,
what
resilience.
trouble has past Mark got me into? No.
No, that's not necessarily a quote. It is more, I guess, this resilience that comes from confronting what I think is too scary.
Yeah, I mean, resilience doesn't come from overwhelming ourselves, right? Resilience comes from meeting our edges and doing things that are difficult. That's what martial arts is. What, I just had my ice bath, right? My weightlifting this morning, all these things that are difficult. This is how we build resilience, by doing things in a controlled, systematic, intelligent way that are difficult. Otherwise we just get weaker and weaker. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I see in California. That's what I see in modern culture generally. It's just got ridiculously soft. But it's there are ways around that. And I think people are waking up to that, whether it's, spending time in the woods, being slightly uncomfortable, sitting on the floor, cooking around a fire. Like, there's ways to do it. And then there's ways to do it in an urban manner as well. And then, of course, like, whatever, if we're doing embodied work, if we're facilitating, it is going to bring up everything. So like all the students that come to you, they're a mirror, right? Like, I had a certain kind of student I just kept having, and it was annoying the shit out of me. And I just had to do some work on a particular side of myself. So, as a teacher, as an embodiment person, everything gets revealed. There's nowhere to hide, really.
I'm curious about that. Can you speak to that? Like, does that mean that growth is inevitable, or that like harm is inevitable?
The difference between growth and harm. Oh, this is quotable. The difference between growth and harm is the amount of support you have. So this is, Paul would call it a calibration issue, but calibration is only ever in relationship to the amount of support you have. So growth is inevitable. The human being is trying to grow, right? Like, our system is trying to learn, it's trying to overcome things, trying to get bigger and better. But our system is also homeostatic. Our system also is conservative. It wants to stay the same. Yeah. So what do we do to grow? I mean, we need to keep having enough difficulty to motivate us and to provide the edge to grind our sword against, but not so much difficulty that we're just surviving and coping and overwhelmed by shit. Like, there's in Buddhism, this is called the human realm, right? If we're in the hell realm, it's no good. If we're in the God realm, that's no good. The human realm is like, okay, I got problems, I got challenges, I got shit I've got old age, disease, and death, if nothing else. I've got shit going on, but I'm doing okay. This is the benefit of Western culture, is compared to, say, Ethiopia, or actually Somalia, maybe now, not Ethiopia, or Afghanistan. We have the basics covered, right? Like, how often are you hungry? Like, I have to choose to be hungry.
Right. Yeah.
Right. How often are you cold? I have to choose to be cold. So it's like, we're pretty comfortable. So that's a huge privilege compared to most of our ancestors. Like anyone alive in the West is in the 1%. Like, we're in the 1% of lucky bastards who won the lottery of history. And I don't think it's going to last forever either. So it's going to be some Mad Max shit. But
yeah, why do you think we're all here learning survival skills?
I have to say, I think you're smart, So it's good for a jumper.
No, great. I do. Is that what you mean by decadence? I'm like, oh, that's interesting. You're on this thread about decadence.
It brings a lot of things together.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle, well, maybe in my, privileged business mind of like thinking I can save the world with my plans. But like Home for Humanity as a podcast idea, this idea of creating a home for not just our physical body. Actually, this is funny. I think about this all the time. During the Embodied Yoga Principles workshop in Austin, we were asked to make up our own pose, and I came up with shelter pose, kind of like grounded, but like with this over my head. And I was like, it feels like an intrinsic aspect of humanity, the need for shelter, and then coming out and being told to thrive in the woods, build your own shelter with forest material. Well, shit, that's like a task. That's not easy. How do you actually protect yourself from the elements with nothing?
Yeah.
And it seems like with the disparity where what I see, it's like I want people to have all that their wholeness met, because I mean in that instance I found thriving. I was able, I wasn't a real survival situation, there was protection, and that goes back to like support is growth, and not, it wasn't harm. The risk was lower, and so yeah, what's my question? Is it too much? Is it too tall of an order to have that met? To have that, yeah, we are in the 1%, but do you still see so much pain? And maybe like you said, it's just going to get worse, but do we as whole beings have the skills to help others have their humanity?
Listen, like if you're tuned into your life purpose, you're going to be happy. And, doing that will almost certainly involve some contribution to others. Like, I don't know any life purpose that doesn't involve contributing to others. So like, that's our responsibility. Saving the world, too big an ask. Who knows, like, whether we're fighting a losing battle or a winning battle, I'm still fighting, fine. Like, it's like, that's the only game in town. What else are you going to do? Despair, addiction? I've tried those things. They suck. So it's sort of like, look, just sort of, this is a Bhagavad Gita, to skip traditions. Like, fight the battlefield you're on. And, for each of us, it's a different calling. I do think we need to understand that civilizations rise and fall, and we're almost certainly in the fall period of one. And, there's things we can do that are positive. We can slow that fall. We can create a renaissance, which actually reverses it, at least temporarily. We could hasten the fall. Or, what I look at people like you, what they're doing is kind of like Isaac Asimov's foundation. You're building a foundation to build back better. So it's, when it all goes to shit and everyone's living Mad Max world, all those people that have learned all the forestry skills and all the, my mum who knows how to make grow potatoes and things. It's like, people that know how to sew clothes, right? Like all those people are going to be like gold. They're you know what the foundation is in Isaac Asimov? Okay, so in Isaac Asimov, basically, he has this theory that all civilizations come and go, which is true. Same basic things. He realizes in the decadent stage of this space civilization, and they make a colony to sort of save the best of humanity. So he says, look, it's inevitable. It's all going to go to shit. But you know what? Humanity can spring back a lot quicker and a lot better if we make this save this kind of arc. That's Noah's Ark story, right? You save some of the best. So I think that's another way of looking at it. I'm probably more geared to the sort of Renaissance 2.0 approach, stopping the decadence. And what's cool is the youth are really up for it. Like the youth are going to be the most conservative, sensible generation there's been in 100 years. Conservative in a positive way. I know Americans are often scared of conservatives because you have some crazy religious ones, but it's
that's the shadow of the West Coast, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, what does the West Coast create, right? Like the decadence of the West Coast. What does it create?
Ultra conservatism.
Right. So the danger of decadence, one of the bad endings, barbarians invading as an ending, collapse as an ending. But another bad ending is the swing to religious fundamentalism. Because in a time of sort of postmodern chaos, people want certainty again. Right? Yeah. So this is the kind of Warhammer 40K option for people that study science fiction, where kind of like you kind of have the religious, ultra orthodox take over. I mean, this is what happened in 1930s Germany, by the way. Most people know about the Nazis, but they don't know about the Weimar Republic. So before the Nazis was like a super liberal, sex, drugs, decadent culture in Germany. Like Hitler hated Berlin, right? He was much bigger and more conservative Munich. Berlin was an absolute cesspit, right? So it's like, yeah, one swing can create the other, and you've got to be very careful with that. I mean, I want to create an initiation, particularly for young people and young men in the UK, and potentially a large organization of young people in the UK, because if I don't, then neo-Nazis will. And that's already happening in Eastern Europe. So it's, we need a healthy integration of the conservative, or else you get the unhealthy version, which is, you know, liberals, they think that's all of the West. They think that's all of and just to destroy all of culture is absolutely insane. I mean, the West has very special features. And the question I put to any listeners who are disagreeing and think, oh, the West's terrible, colonialism, racism. I'm like, compared to what? This is Thomas Sowell's question, one of the great American heroes. He should have been the first Black president. Thomas Sowell, if people don't know him, great historian, great economist from America. And he always says, compared to what? Like, where do you, like, if I said to you, Sarah, like, hey, I've got a teleporter, you can go anywhere in the world, anywhere back in time. Where do you as a young woman want to go to? I mean, to visit, maybe, but to live? Like, where are you going? Take your pick. 50% child mortality? Like, that's not much fun. Ringworm, that's not much fun. Or maybe you want the Arab world as a woman, or China. So see what your social credit system's like. You know, Russia, you know, Ukraine's fighting a war to not be part of the Russian world.
Yeah, I would agree that this is probably the best time for me to be alive. And I do see the slow tilt towards religious fundamentalism being like when I say ultra conservatism, that's kind of what I mean is like everything is all the progressive, I mean, I guess in building, this is what I see in building, but like green built, sustainably built things, that to the point that it's become like religious, and like you said, it is extremist. But
I mean, the green thing is extremist. The green thing's become an excuse to control people. It's become an excuse. It's murderous. It wants less people, very explicitly. Yeah,
because
there's a
people
risk.
are have been removed from what nature is. We see, like, I mean, and I see this is one reason that I do work with youth programs and youth nature connection programs, is because I think I needed I needed to hear the despair in children.
And children
think
being taught to despair, though.
That's what I mean, is because, like, why does a 10-year-old think that the world would be better off without humans in it?
Awful.
Because nature is, you know, and I'm not saying this is in any way like the schools, the different organizations I've worked with, it's something that I think some kids are taught in other places, or they already have this preconceived idea, and it's a spectrum, huge spectrum of faith and humanity. But that's something that I've tried. Like, I've tried the whole religious fundamentalist thing, like tried it on, didn't work. You know, I'm not gonna go back to thinking that this isn't the place that we can help. What'd you say?
Doesn't suit you, you know?
It doesn't. No. I think there's so much beauty here and so much can be done, and there is no reason for me to think that I can't. But then I'm like, well, is that part of saving the world is too tall of an order, and this is my
cynicism and despair.
All of that
is a luxury we don't have.
Right.
Cynicism and despair is
no
a nice
time.
Nice way to do nothing, and to be cool, but not, you know. And I think it's actually child abuse when people are saying, hey, you're the last generation, or humans are cancer. It's child abuse to say that. And like the people saying that are out of their minds, and it's murderous, and it ends badly. And I'm seeing young people absolutely destroyed by that messaging. Plus the messaging from the Marxists of Western civilization is terrible, right? From people that haven't traveled or read history.
Yeah, and I don't want to draw that parallel too heavily, and I don't want to sound like I'm just angry at children, but
Angry at children? I'm angry at their fucking liberal teachers.
Well, but
You're
see,
a
I am one of those
hypnotist.
liberal teachers, and that's why I'm like, what is my task here? I have a very, I, I'm here to help, I feel,
Great. So
and
get
I'm
kids
only
in
one
their
teacher.
bodies,
Mm-hmm.
get kids towards finding their life purpose, get them in nature. Nature's the best teacher, as you know, right? You don't have to do much. I used to take groups of kids into woods and stuff. It's fine. They just nature does the work. You don't have to be clever. It's like, tell them Western civilization's got good sides and bad sides, right? Tell them we got some challenges and we'd love them to be part of the solution. Boom.
Yeah,
You know
they're
what
all
I
on
mean?
board.
Like, it's easy.
I do. That's what I'm saying, is I feel like this
Help
is my
them
task.
pursue wholesome pleasure as opposed to addiction and distraction. So the kids are all right. The kids are all right. I like young people are loving the stuff I'm doing on decadence. I see the gym is full of young people. Like young people are, once the baby boomers die off, the young people are going to be, the millennials need to die off a little bit maybe as well. The kids, what are they called, the Zoomers and the Doomers, they'll be fine.
We're
They'll
like
be
30.
Yeah, but the problem is now they're like getting into positions of power. It's terrifying. They think life is Facebook. It's listen, I'm messing around a little bit, Sarah, but I've got to go in a minute. I've got a tutorial. So it's nice to
Sure.
see you. I love talking to
Yeah, you
someone
too.
outside. You're much more chill than my normal interviewers. You can see you're
Oh,
nice,
good.
regulated there.
Yeah, it's been a nice cool morning here. So yeah, I've enjoyed talking to you, Mark. I feel like we squirreled around quite a bit and yeah, landed on enough, I feel like.
Cool. Can I plug a couple of things?
Sure.
Instagram, Mark Walsh, WALSH, the real one, not the fakes. And embodimentunlimited.com, loads of free stuff there on embodiment if people are interested in books and podcasts, various things. We've got an app, but embodimentunlimited.com will be embodiment app if people are interested in that. Loads of free stuff because I know a lot of people are broke.
Cool.
Sarah, I'm proud of you. I love you. Keep up the good work, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Take care. Bye.